The Bible provides for us so many examples of faithful people. They all experienced something remarkable in their walks with God, and some of them have left legacies that last to this very day, even in ways that we could visit ourselves. Join us this week as we talk about Hezekiah the King. Welcome to the Shalom Y'all Ministries podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Keim, along with my great friend, Dr. Daniel McCabe. Daniel, how are you doing these days?
Well, I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm excited that the weather's warmer now, which is to my liking, and I'm making some good progress on projects around the house, and good to see you today. I'm great.
Wonderful to hear. Well, we here at Shalom Y'all truly believe that a walk through the land deepens your walk with the Lord. Our mission is to teach and encourage those who love the Bible, the land of the Bible, and the people of the land. Now, there is a lot going on in the land of Israel these days, of course, but perhaps someday you could join us on a tour of the Holy Land. Reach out for more information on how you or your group could travel there with Shalom Y'all when the time is right. And as we do with each episode, we begin with a couple of mini topics before jumping into our main subject matter of Hezekiah, the King of Judah. So, Daniel, what do you have to lead off for us today?
Well, Adam, Israel is an absolute intellectual marvel. Warren Buffett, of all people, once said, quote, "If you're going to the Middle East to look for oil, you can skip Israel. If you're looking for brains, look no further," end quote. Israel has contributed enormously to the fields of agriculture and technology, health and science. And with this in mind, let me suggest some unique places that you can visit on your next trip to Israel. Perhaps we can go there together. The first is the Salad Trail. The Salad Trail of all things. Yeah, most people don't travel to the southern part of Israel, which is known as the Negev, which means the south. It has wide open spaces and desert heat, and that keeps a lot of people away. But even there in the Negev, the Israelis have triumphed. They have brought streams out of the desert. And on the Salad Trail, a professional agronomist will guide you through this area's high-tech agricultural industry with its amazing innovations. You'll even get to pick and eat your own food for the tour. So let's head there maybe next time we go to Israel. That would be fun. Second, let's try heading back north to the city of Haifa on the coast of Israel. It's the country's largest science museum that I have in mind to visit, the Madetech Museum. It's called, with its interactive exhibits. It covers the fields of mechanics, robotics, aeronautics, and communication. And while there, we might also want to find the special palm tree on site that was planted by Albert Einstein in 1923. And then lastly, let's be sure to swing by the city of Rehovot, just a few miles southwest of Ben Gurion Airport, so just a short taxi ride perhaps, where you can walk through the visitor center of the Weizmann Institute of Science, a public research university that's older than the state of Israel itself. This institute has produced at least 6 Nobel Peace Prize winners, or Nobel Prize winners, rather. So there's plenty to explore there in the visitor center, and perhaps you might even want to enroll. I think that would be fun. So there's 3 ideas for us on our next trip to Israel. Any of those sound interesting to you, Adam?
They do sound interesting. None of them which I have experienced myself before. But yeah, it's, in modern Israel, there's a lot that I don't know about it. And my focus is on kind of ancient Israel and all that sort of stuff. Although I've been to modern Israel, there's
Right.
so much there that you just miss if you're not paying attention, or if you're just going to Israel for kind of one slice of history, which it has many, then there's so much that you're missing out on. So all of those sound like fun things that, yes, you and I should do next time we're there together.
Done.
All right. Well, in a little bit, we will look at a certain prayer of Hezekiah himself. But for my mini topic, let's simply visit the words of another faithful man of Scripture, Moses. Now, I enjoy reading the prayers and songs of such people because in them we learn a lot about who God is, certainly how the person felt about who God is, and we can be encouraged by how he contends for his children. Now, Moses sang a song to God after the Lord brought Israel through the Red Sea, while, of course, escaping from Pharaoh's hot pursuit, which we'll find in Exodus chapter 15. And verse 1 of chapter 15 says this: Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. You know, Daniel, that's interesting. We don't really often think of God as a God of war sometimes, but, you know, Moses had just experienced God achieving basically a military victory over Pharaoh. And he says in verse 4, Pharaoh's chariots and his host he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury. It consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, the floods stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, and this is Pharaoh thinking, I will pursue, I will overtake. I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. But of course, we know Pharaoh did not get to realize that intention. Moses continues in verse 10. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. And really, now this is kind of the point that Moses is getting to. And this is really what I love reading about these songs of victory and prayers. The focus on who God is through this and his greatness. He says in verse 11, Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. And there Moses is focusing on the peoples that Israel will encounter in the promised land, and all the enemies of Israel that God will take care of, so to speak. In verse 16, he says, Terror and dread fall upon them because of the greatness of your arm. They are still as a stone, till your people, O Lord, pass by, till the people pass by whom you have purchased. And Moses concludes by looking to a hopeful future. You will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. So that's just one of these several examples of songs and prayers in the Bible that I think we can read and be encouraged and think about how such faithful people have thought about the Lord himself. So, Daniel, what is this week's trivia question?
We know there's a lot of things, a lot of reasons, I guess I should say, of why you and I get along and like each other so much. But one of the things that I love about you is that you and I are both self-proclaimed Old Testament junkies. Am I right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so I have a question for you and our listeners from the book of Genesis, and it's straight from the story of Noah and the ark. You know that story, Adam?
Yeah, fairly well. I've heard of it.
Okay. I thought you might. It's pretty familiar to most people, I think. But I still think there's a decent chance that I might stump you even so, because my question comes from a part of the story that's really easy to go flying by. So let's see how you do. You ready?
I think so. We'll see.
Okay, I'll ask the question. You'll have some time to think about it, and then we'll return to it, of course, as we always do at the end of the podcast. But here it is. According to Genesis 8:20, and no peeking now, but according to Genesis 8:20, what did Noah sacrifice to the Lord after exiting the ark? Was it A, a bull, B, a lamb, C, a pigeon, D, all of the above, or E, none of the above? A bull, a lamb, pigeon, all of the above, or none of the above? Think that one over, and we'll, as always, have the answer for you later in the podcast.
Well, sometimes the best summary we can have of a biblical character is by, I think, seeing them in their most outstanding moment. I think Hezekiah is a good example of this. So let's read about what happened when the king needed the Lord the most. And of course, King Hezekiah, king of Judah, well after the split between Israel to the north and Judah for the south. If you don't know a lot of the historical context of the man Hezekiah, well, you'll learn about him this week. But you can read about him in 2 Kings, and I'll focus on him as we find him in Isaiah chapter 36 and 7. But something happens during the reign of King Hezekiah. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 36 here, and I'll kind of walk through the next couple chapters, just selected portions of it to get an idea of what I think is kind of his most outstanding moment in his reign. So he was a good king that came to power and coming along kind of a line of evil kings, and he has some great spiritual reforms in Israel. And in his day, the Assyrian Empire has now conquered all of the northern kingdom of Israel, at the hand, of course, of God, to bring discipline to his people that have turned faithlessly away from him. But now Hezekiah is king of the southern portion of the country, tribes of Judah, Benjamin. And Isaiah 36, verse 1 says this: In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And the king of Assyria sent the Rabshakeh, which is a high official in his empire, his representative, from Lachish, the city that Sennacherib was sieging. He sent the Rabshakeh to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem with a great army. And Jerusalem really is the last holdout. Sennacherib is sieging Lachish, which was a major city, but Jerusalem really was kind of all that was left to Israel. And the Rabshakeh stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field, which is close to the Gihon spring. And there came out to him Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder. These three men that will now represent Hezekiah, the king of Judah. So the Rabshakeh said to them, say to Hezekiah, and he's calling up to them as they're up on the city wall, say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? In whom do you now trust that you've rebelled against me? Behold, you are trusting in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Such as Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. So the Rabshakeh is taunting Hezekiah for maybe hoping that Egypt will come to his rescue, because Egypt also was on the hit list of the Assyrians there. But by this time, Egypt wasn't nearly as strong as they used to be. He continues, but if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God. Well, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? So the Rabshakeh is a little confused here. He knows a little bit about what's going on in Israel, that Hezekiah had made many spiritual reforms, and he was tearing down high places throughout Israel. But those high places he was tearing down were inappropriate places of worship. All the Rabshakeh thinks is, well, you're tearing down places to your own God. How can you really trust in him now? So he's confused, but he's taunting the king of Israel as kind of any commander of an invading army would. Jumping down to verse 11, Hezekiah's representatives now said back to the Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in the language of Judah within the hearing of the people who are on the wall. That's interesting to me, Daniel. They request him to speak in Aramaic, which was the language that the Assyrians would have well understood, but not everybody in Israel. And they do this so that the people with them holed up in Jerusalem wouldn't lose heart, so they wouldn't understand what the Rabshakeh is saying. But he responded, has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men sitting on the wall who are doomed with you? Well, he wants to taunt the people of Israel. He wants to dishearten the common citizen. So anyway, he stood and called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. So the Rabshakeh, the Assyrian, he's really taunting them, and he's trying to convince the people to not trust in the one true God, which Hezekiah has been encouraging the people to turn to the Lord in this. He continues in verse 16, do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me. Then each one of you will eat of his own vine, and each one of his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink the water of his own cistern. I will take you to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, of bread and vineyards. So he's trying to convince the common person in Jerusalem to abandon Hezekiah and think, hey, if we surrender, maybe the king of Assyria will treat us well, and we won't have to die here. And so he continues then to try to convince the people to abandon trust in the Lord, taunting them that really they don't stand a chance against the king of Assyria anyway. But in verse 21, we see Hezekiah's representatives were silent and answered him not a word, for the king's command was, do not answer him. Don't listen to him. So that sets the stage here. Now in chapter 37 in Isaiah, we see that Hezekiah's men report back to him of what the Rabshakeh was saying. Now here's where we get to, I think, Hezekiah's greatness here. As soon as King Hezekiah heard it, he tore his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. Now, Hezekiah really didn't have anywhere else to go, but I think that the temple is probably the first place he would have gone anyway. We already see that he's been trying to convince the people to turn to the Lord. And so he's going to go and take refuge in the Lord himself. He then sent his messengers to Isaiah the prophet to appeal to God for help. And then we see God's response through Isaiah in verse 5. When the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, say to your master, thus says the Lord, do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the young men of the king of Assyria have reviled me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him, that is Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, so that he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his own land. It's interesting. That's God's guarantee to Hezekiah that, don't worry, I'll take care of this. So the Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria fighting against Libnah, for he had heard that the king had left Lachish. So Rabshakeh goes back to the king of Assyria, who now is attacking Libnah, which is just a few miles north of Lachish. Now the king heard concerning Tirhakah, king of Cush. He has set out to fight against you. There's that rumor of somebody that's going to attack him. And when he had heard it, he sent his messengers to Hezekiah, saying, now he's going to taunt Hezekiah again, to try basically saying, don't go anywhere, I'm going to get you. Thus shall you speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah. Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you by promising that Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, you've heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands, devoting them to destruction. And shall you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them, the nations that my fathers destroyed? And then he goes on to list a bunch of places that Assyria had already taken care of, and his own father and father before him. And they've already taken all of Samaria, so really Jerusalem's all is left. And if you're Sennacherib, yeah, I don't blame him for having all the confidence in the world, because he's not trusting in the one true God. He doesn't think that Yahweh will deliver his people, because none of the other supposed gods have delivered their people. So in verse 14, we see Hezekiah receives this letter from the hands of the messengers, and he reads it. And he went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed, saying, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. And hear all the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the nations in their lands, and have cast all their gods into the fire. And I love this about Hezekiah, because he realizes what these other supposed gods are. He says, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. They're just idols. Therefore they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are the Lord. And then if you continue reading in chapter 37 of Isaiah, verses 21 through 29, you see more detail of prophetic, poetic ways that God responds, even directly to Sennacherib, saying, "I'm going to take you back the way you came," and all that sort of stuff. But then in verse 30, God says, "And this shall be the sign for you." This is for Israel. "This year you shall eat what grows of itself, and the second year what springs from that. Then in the third year sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And the surviving remnant of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward." That really was an amazing prophecy, because with Assyria having taken over the whole land, they rule the roost. They own everything. Israelites cannot just go out and plant vineyards and eat their fruit later, because the Assyrians are there, and nobody can dislodge them because they're too powerful. But God's promise to them is, "Oh, you shall farm your own land, and you're gonna be fine." Verse 32: "For out of Jerusalem shall go a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Therefore thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mount against it. By the way that he came, by the same he shall return. And he shall not come into the city, declares the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it, for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David." He basically says the Assyrian king is going to have to go back the way he came, back the Assyrian way. He's not going to be able to conquer Jerusalem and then move on. And then we read something astonishing, which we wish we had more detail about. This is just one passing mention. "And the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies." You don't think about that. 185,000 people just pop up dead. You wake up as a Jerusalemite, and but I wish we had more detail. What was that like? What happened? How did that happen? What was the aftermath of that? How long did it take for the Israelites to just carry off all these bodies? That would have been a big deal in the weeks, months, and years following. That would have been a major historical event, just dealing with all the corpses. We don't read anything about that. That's not really the point. The point is, the Lord intervened and saved his people against impossible odds. And in verse 37, "Then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh." So Daniel, Sennacherib's prism, you know about that, is an archaeological artifact that was discovered in 1830 at the ruins of Nineveh. It's a six-sided kind of prism with cuneiform writing all around it. It records Sennacherib's many exploits, and he boasts that he shut up Hezekiah like a caged bird in his royal city. That's quite the boast. But notice that he could not claim to have destroyed Jerusalem or captured Hezekiah, which was the primary goal of that military campaign. Now, he bragged about taking Lachish, which was a big deal, and it shows the strategic importance of that city. But that was just a positive PR spin for his ultimate failure to take Jerusalem. That he would brag about taking Lachish, but not take Jerusalem, that is a historical record of, wow, just God intervened. And we read in verse 38, the rest of God's prophecy does come true, although it takes 20 years. And as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, Adramelech and Sharezer, his sons, struck him down with the sword. And after they escaped into the land of Ararat, speaking of Noah, you know where he lands. I'm still thinking through that trivia question, by the way. But
okay.
Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. That happened in 681 BC. Again, about 20 years after his return from Jerusalem. So, God said he'll be struck down with the sword in his own land. That did happen, even though it took about 20 years. That's a reminder to me that, we always want things done quickly in our time, but, God has his time in which he works all things together. But what an amazing deliverance that God worked for Hezekiah and his people that day. So that was just kind of a walk through Isaiah 36 and 37, one of the major points in Hezekiah's life. But what a faithful man to turn to the Lord. And against all odds, he prays, he trusts, and God delivers. So, Daniel, what can you teach us about this great king, Hezekiah?
Well, you gave our folks a great walkthrough of this passage, and now I'm going to grab a shovel and I'm going to dig down a little bit.
All right.
So many of our listeners may not know that before the Lord called me into the ministry, I worked for an aerospace firm in Texas as a mechanical engineer. Engineering is my first love. And so I got to tell you, I was thrilled when you said to me during our show prep, why don't you just cover more details about Hezekiah's tunnel? All right. Well, I didn't have to think about that proposition for more than a nanosecond. So I do want to dig in on that today. So that's my only pun of the day.
Nice.
Now Hezekiah's tunnel, Israel in general, is a science marvel, and Hezekiah's tunnel is an engineering marvel. Because after the death of King Sargon II of Assyria in 705 BC, King Hezekiah of Judah, he stopped paying a tribute to the king of Assyria. Now, he knew that if he stopped paying tribute, retaliation was going to come, and he braced for that retaliation by fortifying the key cities of the kingdom of Judah, including and especially Jerusalem, his capital. Now, obviously, it would be disastrous for the residents of Jerusalem and for all those who, upon hearing about Assyria's invasion, would soon flee to Jerusalem by the thousands from smaller surrounding cities like those you mentioned. It would obviously be disastrous if the Gihon Spring, Jerusalem's only natural water source, which was situated just outside the city's eastern wall, if it fell under the control of the surrounding besieging Assyrian army. So in order to survive this impending siege, Hezekiah, he covered and disguised the natural outlet of the spring. He blocked and abandoned an earlier watercourse that had been used to channel the spring water into the Kidron Valley east of the city. It was used to irrigate the king's garden in the valley. And then he constructed a secret tunnel through the sloping bedrock of Jerusalem in order to divert the spring water under the city's eastern wall and into a reservoir, which we've written a lot about here at Shalom Y'all Ministries, commonly known as Siloam's Pool. And it was on the southwest end of the city, just within the walls during the time of Hezekiah. So the Bible records Hezekiah's construction of the tunnel specifically. It mentions it in 2 Chronicles 32, 2 through 4, if you want to check that out. But you're right, Adam. Hezekiah's tunnel is still an existing legacy of all that the king did, this faithful man did. One of many things we can see that he has left for us, and it's still functioning today. You can wade through the tunnel if you want. The water's pretty cold, and it comes up about 27 inches while you're walking through the tunnel, which is roughly to your knees or thighs. For me, it probably comes up more to my nose since I'm short. Well,
Yeah, you
but
have to put on your snorkel and
I
put
do.
on your flippers, don't you, to get through that?
Yeah, I have been to Jerusalem many times for a visit there, and I have yet to skip a walk through this ancient tunnel. Now, in some places, you do have to duck your head to get through the tunnel. The ceiling is fairly low, and as I said, I'm 5'7" on a good day, and I even have to duck in some places when I'm going through the tunnel. But there are also parts of the tunnel, especially near the end of the tunnel, that are as high as 17 feet. So it's all over the place. In any event, the tunnel winds around in a choppy, sweeping S for 1,751 feet, which is almost exactly 1/3 of a mile. When you're inside the tunnel, it's pitch black, so you definitely need a flashlight or a headlamp, and it's shoulder width in most places, so you won't be able to move very quickly. And I can imagine what the challenge was for the construction workers back in the day as they're trying to cut through there when they only cut just enough for one person to walk through. I guess they would have to leapfrog each other to get past. But you can literally see the markings of the axes that the construction workers used. They were cutting through the tunnel from different directions. We'll see that here momentarily. And you can see one direction the axes cut this way, and the other they cut the other. You can also see an occasional air shaft, and even places in the rock, even places where they would put their lamps to be able to see. So it's very interesting. In 1880, archaeologists discovered a 6-line inscription in ancient Hebrew, which was carved into the soft limestone rock wall near the lower end of the tunnel right before it came out into Siloam's pool. And this 6-line inscription, it described how two teams of diggers began work on opposite ends of the tunnel, and then they met in the middle. But there's one secret that the tunnel keeps to itself. How in the world were the tunnelers rather, able to know what direction to dig exactly in order to meet in the middle? To dig from both ends made sense because they're trying to speed up the construction process. They're trying to get it done before the Assyrians might come. But with the tunnel as deep as 100 feet in places, 100 feet below the surface of the ground, no one knows how they managed to connect both ends so precisely and at just the right degree of descent through the bedrock. Now, some have speculated that they followed a natural fissure in the rock, though there's no real indisputable evidence for one. And it has led, really, in more recent times, to speculation that the tunnelers followed acoustic signals from fellow engineers above the ground. And I'm prone to think that that makes a lot of sense, but we'll never know for sure. So, how does the story end? You told us a little bit about this, Adam. The Assyrians, under Sennacherib, Sargon II's son, they do arrive in Jerusalem in force in 701. And if not for the ingenuity of Hezekiah's engineers, the people may have perished or been taken into slavery. Second Chronicles 32:21 records that in response to Hezekiah's prayer for deliverance, as you reminded us earlier, the Lord sent, quote, the Lord sent an angel who cut down every mighty man of valor, leader, and captain in the camp of the king of Assyria. So, and here's the part I like, so he returned shamefaced to his own land, end quote. Ultimately, God protected his people from the Assyrians, but the tunnel still stands today as a silent witness of God's protection. If you travel to Jerusalem, sign up for the 3-hour tour that culminates in a, well, I guess about a 25-minute walk through the tunnel. I like to always let other groups go first into the tunnel ahead of whatever size group I have. That way, we can take pictures along the way without holding up others. And if you like to sing, go for it. I think I wrote a post a year or so ago on the 5 best places to sing in the land of Israel, and this made my list for sure. So sing, it's a wonderful time. It just kind of bonds your group in a remarkable way as you walk through that tunnel, and you can just feel the ancient history. You can touch it all around you. My middle son, Jake, even asked me a couple of years ago to fill up a small bottle of water from the tunnel, and we have that proudly on display back here at the house. So I just love Hezekiah's tunnel. Well, let's return now to our trivia question from earlier, and you have time to think. Sometimes why I guess I'm sharing Adam. I asked, according to Genesis 8:20, what did Noah sacrifice to the Lord after exiting the ark? I could have tried to slip in there Moses to see if you could have caught that.
Ooh,
Moses
tricky one.
sacrificed to the Lord, the ancient joke that I learned when I was little. But Noah sacrificed to the Lord after he exited the ark, and what was it? Was it A, a bull, B, a lamb, C, a pigeon, or D, all of the above, or E, none of the above? What do you think?
Well, you gave me an out on this one. You kind of saved me. As you were giving the options, I was thinking, bull sounds good, a nice strong animal, a worthy sacrifice to the Lord. Lamb, ooh, how symbolic that would have been.
Uh-huh.
And then pigeon, when you said pigeon, I was like, well, maybe that's it, because I think I remember something about birds, clean birds. But then as I thought more, Genesis is one of those books that I know pretty well. I mean, I haven't memorized every word of it, but I know it fairly well. And as I was thinking, I don't remember it listing specific animal. Like he sacrificed a lamb or a sheep or whatever.
Okay.
And then you said all of the above or none of the above. And I think if I remember right, it's a general, then he made sacrifices. So I'm just gonna say all of the above, and those were probably involved in it. I don't think it's none of the above, because I know I'm just gonna say all of the above.
Look at you. That's so good. Genesis 8:20 says, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took of every clean animal
That's right.
and of every clean bird, and he offered burnt offerings on the altar. So I picked a few of them, listed them there. I suppose you could say, excuse me, I suppose you could say my question's a little controversial because he did more than a bull, lamb, and pigeon, and I guess you could get that out. But we can say that at least he sacrificed a bull, a lamb, and a pigeon,
for sure.
And I may know what you are thinking at this point, or some of our listeners may be thinking, because I remember once thinking it myself. I remember thinking, but wait, if Noah took animals 2 by 2 into the ark and then killed one of every clean animal after getting off the ark, then how could the animals reproduce? Then what? How could there only be one left? That wouldn't make sense, because then we wouldn't be able to enjoy barbecue, for example, right?
Exactly. He had Texas in mind even back then.
So what's the key, Adam? Do you know?
Well, he took more than just a pair of the clean animals. There was more than just one pair of them.
Yes. In fact, he took, it says, 7 of every clean animal on the ark in chapter 7, verses 2 and 3. Not just a pair of pigeons, for example, but depending on how you read the Hebrew, 7 pigeons or pairs of pigeons, and all the other clean animals as well. So if they kill one pigeon, you've got at least 6 others left. So I guess we would be good, huh?
I'd say so.
Okay. Well, congratulations. You have once again proven your prowess in the Old Testament.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let me take just a moment now to remind our listeners about our website. You know about it, but I think what I want to emphasize to you is one particular aspect of it. So you can head over sometime, hopefully you will, soon to shalomyallministries.org. Shalom Y'all Ministries, no spaces, no apostrophe, shalomyallministries.org. And check out our archives page on the website. You can explore articles there written by myself and Adam and even some guest writers. And you will find not just articles there, but hundreds and hundreds of articles there.
There's a lot. Yep.
There is an enormous amount that we have produced just in the last 2.5 years. So go to the archives page and you can scroll down at your leisure if you're a student and you're studying a paper for school, perhaps, or you just want to learn, or you're particularly interested in current events. You'll find all kinds of articles on there. On my computer, now I don't know how it is on yours, but on my computer, I've discovered there's a function called the Control F function.
Mm-hmm.
And if I hit Control F, up pops a little search box, and I can type in a topic into that search box, and it will go down and it will search all the occurrences of that on my page. For example, earlier today, I hit Control F, I typed in the random name Herod, and I found 5 separate articles related to Herod. So there's a lot of information on our site that you might find helpful. Check it out, shalomyallministries.org.
That is a great resource. Yeah, we have written a lot, and other people have, and have just posted some other things. There's a lot of different types of things too. If you're looking for just things about archaeology, biblical content, theology, we highlight people, places. Yeah, and there's a lot to say about Herod and a lot of other things. So yeah, great resource for you there, and that's why we have it. And we do hope that you've enjoyed this look into one of the great men of God, Hezekiah the King of Judah. And when the pressures of this world surround you, as they did him, will you stand firm in faith? Remember the example of Hezekiah and trust that the Lord will carry you through. Shalom, y'all.
Shalom, y'all.